Order. I call Jess Brown-Fuller to move the motion.
Thank you, Sir Desmond. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship and to have secured this debate on access to dental services in West Sussex, on Sussex Day, no less. So I am confident that the Minister will have some excellent responses on behalf of all of the constituents in Sussex, and to have the opportunity to lay out the impact of the historic failings within the dental contract before the Minister today. Because the state of access to NHS dental services across the country is utterly disgraceful. In Sussex, 63% of adults had not seen a dentist in the 2 years prior to June 2025. Similarly, 4 in 10 children had not seen a dentist during that time. 14 million people were unable to access NHS dental care in early 2025 across the UK. And the result of people locked out of NHS dental services has been a rise in cases of DIY dentistry, with a survey earlier this year suggesting that 7% of UK adults had attempted some form of DIY dentistry. All of this contributes to an alarming increase in hospital admissions for tooth-related issues. Tooth decay is now the most common reason for hospital admission among children aged between 6 and 10, with more than 100,000 children admitted to hospital with rotting teeth between 2018 and 2024. These figures outline a dire situation that is only getting worse. Improvements in oral health are being wiped out, and tooth decay rates are at levels not seen since the 1990s. I'll happily give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Mr. Can I commend the Honourable Lady for bringing this forward? She's absolutely right to say that there's a dental crisis, not just in West Sussex, but across the whole of the United Kingdom. Some 14 million people can't get an NHS dentist. Whenever I look back, and I'm old enough to look back, Mr. Chairman, from my age, I can well remember in the past, and does the Honourable Member agree, that perhaps we're moving back to a situation where it was in the past, where a full-time NHS dental surgery in community hospitals to provide the provision, they never let us down, and these positions must pay enough for dentists to be confident. Is that perhaps where we're going?
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his passionate advocacy for NHS dentistry in West Sussex. I am very grateful to him for caring about access to NHS dentistry across the whole country. He's a fierce advocate for Strangford, and I think he makes a really important point that actually the situation that we're in is a damning indictment of the failure of the previous government, a failure that actually the Prime Minister himself referred to regularly in the run-up to the general election. It was a stick that he used to beat the Conservative government on every televised debate when he spoke about teeth falling out of children's mouths, rotting. But, Sir Desmond, we are still going backwards, dealing with problems on a scale not seen for generations, all at a time when the British Dental Association has warned that NHS dentistry is facing an existential threat. Now, Parliament often hears the term postcode lottery, but I cannot think of a more applicable example than NHS dental services for residents in Chichester and West Sussex. Last week, I had the opportunity to conduct a little bit of research with a staff member who has recently moved to London and needs to register for an NHS dentist. Within 2 miles of his new postcode in London, there were 10 surgeries that are offering NHS patients to sign up. Entering the postcode of my constituency office in Chichester into the NHS search tool produced a very different result. 0 surgeries accepting new adult NHS patients within a 12-mile radius. There were none within the city itself, and only 1 surgery was accepting new patients under the age of 17. It means that residents not registered locally have to travel to other towns and cities. At the time of looking, Sir Desmond, the closest was Littlehampton, in my honourable friend, the member for Bognor Regis and Littlehampton's constituency. That is not close by to the city of Chichester. So I asked the Minister what his solution would be for those that are attempting to register locally, those living in the area already and those moving to it after years of increased mandated development in my constituency. And I'd like to share a few examples of what this means for my constituents in Chichester with the Minister, who very kindly got in touch with me to share their stories. Catherine moved with her family to the area 4 years ago. She still travels to 3 Bridges for dental care. Christine still returns to the Isle of Wight for treatment. Marina and Denise moved to Bracklesham in 2011, 15 years ago, and have never been able to register for an NHS dentist locally. Jim contacted me to say that he undertakes a 140-mile round trip just to receive routine dental care.
Would the Honourable Lady give way on that?
Happily give way on that point.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and commend her on an excellent speech. And I would just say that some of my residents still travel to their dentist NHS clinic in Nottinghamshire, which is an over 500-mile round trip from Cornwall. But would my honourable friend agree with me that Cornwall ICB needs to sort out its underspend? This year it was £1.2 million underspend that could have been invested in vital NHS dental services. And I understand that West Sussex actually have a good example of this, where they've managed to reinvest any underspent money on the services that she's talking about that's so desperately needed in West Sussex and in Cornwall.
My honourable friend makes an excellent point about his local ICB, and the underspend has been an issue which has plagued the dentistry contract over many years. Actually, the ICB Sussex did manage to commission some more urgent dental care using their underspend, which meant that they had very little to give back to the Treasury, which is absolutely the right thing to do. And I commend the honourable member for recognising that that is an opportunity for Cornwall ICB to undertake. But what they invested in was the urgent dental care, while not addressing the problem that we have in routine dental care. So residents in Chichester cannot access routine dental care in their own city, and they're forced to travel considerable distances. And this takes time out of people's lives, costs money, and creates additional risks. Imagine making that 140-mile round trip for a routine appointment, only to discover that you require an emergency procedure. You are now miles from home and family, and you may not be capable of driving yourself home afterwards. It is completely unacceptable in today's society. To make matters worse, a number of individuals told me that they had been removed from their surgery's patient list, particularly during the pandemic, when they were recognising that they didn't want to be in close contact with others, and they had no notification that that was happening to them. Others were informed out of the blue that their surgery was switching to private care, and that unless they paid, they would need to seek treatment elsewhere. And given the costs involved, as reflected in the national figures, many simply choose to go without the care altogether. And on top of this, individuals who have been lucky enough to secure an NHS place often face enormous waiting times for treatment. Jade shared her experience of being placed on a waiting list for routine root canal treatment and then being ignored for months. At 28 weeks pregnant, she suddenly found herself in excruciating pain and required emergency surgery, which, as we know, costs a lot more to the taxpayer than it does if the issue is addressed before it gets to the emergency point. Another mother contacted me to say that 3 years ago, her son developed an abscess over Christmas, but they were unable to secure emergency treatment, so they joined a waiting list at 3 separate practices. They still have not secured an appointment. These examples all point to a broken system in Chichester and across the country, one that is failing my constituents and worsening health outcomes. And in the long run, it is also making the country poorer, because by failing to invest in preventative care, we are leaving individuals to require more serious and more expensive treatment further down the line. And it has to end, and that view is shared by the dentists I have spoken to ahead of today's debate. A key issue raised by them and by many across the profession is the state of the NHS dental contract. The British Dental Association has identified it as a major factor driving NHS dentists into the private sector, with the current settlement being criticised widely from its inception back in 2006. The Health and Social Care Select Committee published a report in 2023 calling for an urgent overhaul of the system, and the Labour Party promised to renegotiate the contracts in their manifesto. One former dental nurse who contacted me described the contracts as being like tying dentists' hands behind their backs. That's hardly practical if you're trying to perform a root canal. The contracts are failing patients because the number of patients a dentist can see on the NHS is limited, depending on the units of dental activity they have been commissioned to deliver. The nurse I spoke to suggested patients are being referred to hospitals for routine procedures because contractual arrangements prevent practices from carrying them out themselves and then being remunerated. As I said, the government promised to reform these contracts, but has been slow to address problems that are widely recognised across the sector. The consultation that the government announced in April must lead to a contract that is genuinely patient-focused with greater flexibility in commissioning. I know that when announced, the government committed to the consultation coming out before the summer, but the official line has changed slightly to in due course. I share the concern that's being raised by campaigners that any further delay will mean a new system won't be implemented before the end of this Parliament. So will the Minister today commit to the consultation coming out before the summer, and will they also commit to a firm deadline for when formal contract renegotiations will begin? Because we frankly cannot afford any further delays. Another issue is costs. Lab costs went up 9% last year, but NHS contract holders got just a 3.55% uplift. Add to this the hikes in national insurance contributions, which have exacerbated an already dismal situation. The British Dental Association believed an average NHS dentist is losing £25 per routine dental check. Without support and changes to the contracts, many practices will continue to be pushed into the private sector, as we have already seen many do. In West Sussex, the number of dentists with NHS activity has dropped by 13% since 2019. I imagine that figure is actually an underestimation, because a practice can offer just one NHS appointment a year and still feature on the list of NHS providers. Local dentists are also concerned that the merger of the Surrey and Sussex ICBs, alongside a 50% reduction in ICB running costs, could undermine the local commissioning expertise and local relationships with providers. So can the Minister today provide any reassurance that at a time of significant change within our ICBs, they will be given the resource to maintain and improve relationships with contract providers? The government talks a good game when it comes to dentistry, but they are tinkering around the edges and leaving major issues such as the contracts so far unresolved. And they quietly dropped their manifesto pledge of delivering 700,000 more dental appointments under the guise of broadening the definition of urgent dental appointments for clinical reasons. This is a sticking plaster that does not address the requirement for more urgent dental appointments, that does address the requirement for more urgent dental appointments, but does not address those that cannot get routine care, which in many cases would prevent them from needing the emergency care. The Liberal Democrats have long called for reforms that will address the root of the crisis. Our £750 million plan would begin to undo years of underfunding, guarantee urgent and emergency dental care for everyone who needs it, and hopefully bring an end to DIY dentistry. And this would be needed to address the backlogs in emergency care. I've heard of wait times of up to 18 months at St Richard's in Chichester for complex dental treatment like difficult extractions. What is clear, Sir Desmond, is the system is broken. Nobody is naive enough to believe it can be addressed overnight, but the government has had 2 years. All the while, residents in Chichester continue to have a lack of access to basic dental services, and dentists want to help patients, but it isn't financially viable currently for many to stay in the NHS. This has to change, and I urge the government to listen carefully to contributions from all members today during this debate and take the steps that they promised in their manifesto, as have been outlined today. Thank you.